This is an ABC News special report.
And we're looking at video now from inside that theater. It appears to be chaotic. You can hear some of that background noise. You can kind of see people scurrying out of the theater. We don't know exactly when this was taken in relation to what happened in theaters 8 and 9 there at the Century 16 movie theater. But you can get a visual sense now of the chaos that was happening inside that theater moments after this lone gunman opened fire shortly after 12:30 a.m. there in Colorado, Central Time, excuse me, just after again, about 12:30 Central Time. And then apparently before he did that, also opened some kind of canister. Early reports it could have been a tear gas that served as a distraction or a smoke screen before he then opened fire.
And we do have some new information. When the gunman was captured, he had a rifle, handgun, and gas mask, and he told authorities there are explosives in my residence. We have now learned that the suspect's apartment complex, which is in North Aurora, is on lockdown for a search, and they're searching for explosives at this point. So potentially 2 crime scenes right now simultaneously.
And search warrants have been executed. You can imagine police are going to be very anxious to get inside that apartment. They're going to be anxious to speak to neighbors, to friends, to find out exactly who this man was. His apartment is there in the town of Aurora, but certainly a lot of questions have to be answered. And those early interviews now in these first hours of this tragedy are going to be critical in figuring out who this guy was, what could possibly have motivated him to do that. According to Pierre Thomas, our justice correspondent, there is not, I repeat, not a link to any radical radical terrorist groups right now. They're going to investigate whether there's perhaps a link to some domestic groups. And this does fulfill a fear that I know we have all had as Americans, that we've reported on extensively here at ABC News, and that is the growing proliferation of lone wolf terrorists in this country. And we could be looking at another example of that. But again, lots of questions. You can imagine what, besides those alleged explosives, what was in that apartment, and then what did his neighbors, friends, classmates, whoever possibly know.
A massive effort, 250 local officers from across Metro, as Clayton Sandell, who's going to join us again. Clayton, 100 FBI agents. Anything else additionally that you're learning right now, Clayton?
No, just to take you through the timeline, this happened just after 12:30. The movie here, Batman, had just gotten underway.
12:30 Central Time.
On local radio, talked about that there was a scene in the movie where there was a lot of shooting, a lot of explosions, and apparently that is when all of this started to happen. A gunman appeared at the front of one of the theaters. He threw some type of canister, which started releasing some kind of gas. Witnesses reported hearing a hissing sound, and then he opened fire. And at least 50 people were hit. 14 of them we have now confirmed were killed. The gunman was found just outside one of the theaters by police officers who apparently were able to respond rather quickly. He was found in possession of a gas mask, a rifle, and a handgun. And officers tell us that when he was taken into custody, he told them that he had some type of explosive device or devices, we're not sure exactly what, at his residence, an apartment building in North Aurora here in Colorado.
Which is now on lockdown.
Federal and local law enforcement are now en route there to evacuate the apartment building and try and figure out what they have at that scene.
And again, inside that apartment and talking to folks in that area will hopefully answer some questions about who exactly this guy was and what his motivation may be. But it sounds from all these early reports that what was going on here was some attempt to really take advantage, one, of the special effects of that movie, two, if you opened some kind of canister, which was reportedly tear gas. That's unconfirmed at this point, that the motivation here or the operation here was to create this kind of distraction that, one, blended into the movie a little bit, and then two, to kind of create this distraction right there in the theater, perhaps, again, reportedly using tear gas, which many of us have obviously heard of as a riot control agent of sorts, but it does cause irritation to your eyes, irritation to your mouth, your throat, your lungs, and your skin. It's called tear gas because it does make you cry immediately after you're exposed to it. So you combine the special effects of the movie, the effect of the tear gas. This guy had a room full of sitting ducks, confused ducks, and then simply opened fire.
Aurora police are now saying that of the 50 injured, many of those injuries are severe. So we have 14 confirmed dead, 10 died inside the theater, 40 passed away at local hospitals, and of the 50 injured, according to the local authorities out there in Aurora, many of those injuries are severe. So one gunman just inflicting a lot of depravity out there in Aurora, Colorado.
And as you can imagine, we do have a team of... Okay, 1 second before I get to that, I want to mention we do have some new sound into the newsroom from a witness who apparently was there at the theater when this tragedy occurred. Let's listen in.
It took me a second to realize what was actually going on. And as people were running away, I hit the ground so I wouldn't be hit.
Somebody threw gas grenades.
Yeah. That's all I saw. Was I heard the sound of metal canisters clinking around, and then I saw plumes of smoke.
These poor folks had their hands tied, tear gas, special effects, confusion, a dark theater. As he mentioned, metal canisters clinking around. Our senior justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas, is on the case. Pierre, have we learned anything additional about the background of this gunman?
All right, we may have lost Pierre. We'll try to get him back momentarily to get the latest. Again, we do have a team of reporters and producers there trying to get the very latest information, so we want you to stay tuned to here to ABC. Good Morning America, of course, will have full coverage. We believe we do have Pierre back now on the line. Pierre, can you hear us?
We have information that they are searching the suspect's car. They are checking it for evidence. Also, there's information that they're at his residence. There's concern about explosives, obviously, and sources are, again, right now doing a detailed background investigation on the individual. He is described to me as 24 years old, born in December of 1987. Again, early indications are no nexus to terrorism, according to the FBI. Again, they are talking to associates, friends, relatives, trying to get a sense of this person's background, also trying to determine motive.
Thank you for that, Pierre. And what Pierre has focused on, and thank you, Pierre, live again. Thank you, live in Washington. What we've heard Pierre talk about so often over the past few years is the issue of soft targets in this country, because if you think about airports, we know what the security is like there. We take off our shoes, we take off our belt, we walk through those scanners, but we don't do that on buses. We don't necessarily do that on trains. We are with shopping malls, movie theaters, and you have to wonder now, once the dust settles, and that obviously is going to be some days here, and the first thought is with the victims of the deceased and the people who were in the hospital now fighting for their lives, but once we get past the initial shock of this, do we now begin talk about security? And Pierre, let me bring you back in on that point, because so many of your reports have focused on how concerned are national security folks about just this kind of thing, lone wolf suspects taking advantage of what is known as soft targets.
Yes, this is considered the most imminent threat. People who have motives that no one knows about. They don't have any ties to organizations, so it's hard to get information developed about them. They show up, and they show up at soft targets and they start shooting. This is something that the FBI trains for. The Homeland Security Department is quite concerned about. They prepare for these kinds of things. As you see what happened in Colorado, the FBI immediately got dozens and dozens of agents at the scene, not only to deal with victims, but also to begin to do a detailed background check on the individual. And the reason why they do that is they want to get a clear portrait and see if there's a nexus to terrorism, because one of the things you would be concerned about is, are there going to be more incidents? Are there going to be additional incidents in that area? Again, they've identified the suspect, 24-year-old male, born in December of 1987, and from that is the nexus of the investigation and the catalyst for everything going forward. The concern today will be on copycats. That Batman movie obviously is a huge, huge movie. Dozens of lines and major lines across the country, people lining up. Again, it's the worst case scenario for a situation like this, but right now it's looking like a lone wolf situation, but again, very early.
And Pierre, hang on just for a second. I know Paula has some new details just into us.
Children's Hospital in Aurora, and we've mentioned that there are several hospitals treating people, but Children's Hospital in Aurora has 6 victims. The youngest victim is 6 years old.
And that we talked about a minute ago, because of the Batman and family night at the movies, summer break, the kids are out of school. You can imagine several hundred people in that theater. Many had to be parents and young kids who were going just for a night at the movies, and it turned into this. So confirmation already that One of the victims here was just 6 years old.
Just 6 years old, and witnesses within the theater say this gunman was just random, and it just seemed like he was just randomly picking his targets.
Sitting ducks they were. And Pierre, let me bring you back in just for a second. Talk a little bit more about the soft targets here, because do you think something like this will prompt a discussion about security at malls, at bus stations, at movie theaters, which, as you saw, this gunman tonight had a room full, as we said many times, of sitting ducks. Do you think this will prompt some national conversation on should we and ought we be doing more?
Well, there has already been a national conversation since 9/11, quite frankly. They've known that malls have been targets. Most major departments, police departments across the country have a plan for this kind of scenario that you saw enacted in Colorado this morning. The situation now that people will probably have to look at in these scenarios is, do you need police presence at major premieres of movies where you're going to have, again, packed theaters, where you're going to have long lines outside of the theater? That will be a topic of discussion, and I can tell you that law enforcement officials around the country today will be looking at that possibility going forward.
Can you give us your perspective on the law enforcement in terms of their reaction time? Already 350 on the ground, 100 FBI officials, 250 police officers from across the metro Denver area. Seemed like very swift response, Pierre.
Right. This plan has been in place. Most major departments have plans in place for situations like this. Obviously, you need a large cadre of federal agents and local agents. One, to secure the scene. Two, to begin interviewing witnesses. And thirdly, to do the detailed background check on the suspect. That is key, because from that, it tells you how to respond going forward. And that's why you're having the FBI able to say, in general terms, very early in the investigation, that this looks like a lone wolf situation, that there does not at this moment, and again I emphasize at this moment, appear to be a nexus to international terrorism or domestic terrorism. Again, that's how they're able to make those early determinations.
And again, I don't want to make you over-speculate, Pierre, but I do want to ask this question. You have so much experience seeing these kind of incidents. Again, it's early and everything right now is tentative and somewhat speculative, but what drives someone potentially to do something like this if we can rule out terrorism or links to terrorism as a cause, at least in this early stage?
Well, unfortunately, we've had a lot of experience with these kinds of cases. Since 2005 or so, we've had the Virginia Tech shooting, dozens killed. These things happen on a regular basis in the United States. Multiple shootings like this. Unfortunately, it's individuals who are sometimes unstable, sometimes they have political motivations, but often, as we saw in the Tucson shooting, it's a deranged individual with no real, clear, sane reason for the activity.
Pierre, I want to ask you real quick about the gun laws in Colorado. Is it true that in Colorado gun laws, they don't require the registration of any particular type of firearm? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but do you know anything about the gun laws and the restrictions there in Colorado?
Well, unfortunately, it varies from state to state, and I'm not familiar with Colorado's particular gun laws. But look, as a general fact in this country, people can buy and own weapons. And the last time I checked with federal law enforcement authorities, there were over 200 million guns already in circulation. So that tells you that we buy guns in this country just like we buy other products. And that's just a fact of American life.
All right, Pierre, we know you have a busy morning ahead of you. We thank you for sharing some time with us this morning and bringing us the latest on this tragedy unfolding in Aurora. Again, as we leave you now, the final seconds here, we know that there have been 50 folks injured, many severely, 14 dead in what apparently is the act of a lone gunman at a movie theater in Aurora, Colorado. Stay here with ABC for the very latest on this unfolding story, including Good Morning America coming up in many markets in just a few minutes. And we send our thoughts and prayers to everyone in Aurora. Thank you for watching ABC News.
This has been a special report from ABC News.